When the news of young General Shen's death at the border reached the capital, the young mistress was 6 months pregnant. In her extreme grief and shock, her heart and mind were devastated, and in the end she couldn't save the unborn child in her womb. Later, dragging her frail body that was as weak as paper, as if it would scatter with a gust of wind, she walked step by step with great difficulty to the outskirts of the city. Before young General Shen's cenotaph, her face pale, she personally carved her own name onto the cold tombstone. She even resolutely carved it in such and such year and month as. Well, fearing she would be overcome with grief and her body wouldn't hold up, that something might happen to her, I stayed by her side day and night, earnestly urging her to let it go. But in truth, throughout the entire Shen household, except for her who was kept completely in the dark, everyone knew full well General Shen hadn't died in battle at all. It was a fake death. He had met a new beloved girl at the border, and to wait for that girl to safely give birth to his child, he came up with this absurd scheme to deceive everyone. He wanted to force the young mistress to accept reality by creating a fait accompli, so that later she would have no choice but to agree to let that girl enter the household with full honors. When the young mistress sat blankly before the tombstone for the 18th time, I brought the calming soup I'd just finished brewing, preparing to patiently persuade her once more. But she gazed at that desolate stone monument, her tone as calm as stagnant water. Hongju, actually I knew all along that Shen Zhao didn't die. My hand holding the soup bowl trembled violently, the brown broth nearly spilling out, and I froze completely in place. But since he chose this path of deceiving me, my days in this manner have truly come to an end. The young mistress's words carried a kind of desolation I couldn't understand, as if she had seen through the mortal world. She didn't explain further, only turned her head and smiled at me ever so faintly. Let's go. By my count, at this time, Shen Zhao should be returning to the capital in glory with his men. So it turned out, this clumsy and unbearable deception had never fooled her at all. She and General Shen had been childhood sweethearts, once the loving couple envied by everyone in the capital. I had secretly worried in my heart before, if she were to learn the cruel truth later, to know that she had lost her child and damaged her foundation because of a lie. How devastated would she be? Back when the false news of General Shen's death was sent back to the manor, she had been so grief-stricken that she fainted on the spot, nearly losing her breath. But I was just an insignificant little maid in the Shen household, and aside from feeling heartache for her, I was powerless to do anything. As I turned to go back to the manor, he couldn't help but look back once more at that tombstone. On the grey-white cold stone tablet were carved glaring dark red characters. Jiang Yu died on the 10th day of the 5th month in the 11th year of Great Yin. I bit my lip and mustered up the courage to speak. Young madam, how about, we still have the servant push down this tombstone. The 10th day of the 5th month, counting from now, that would be 10 days later, no matter how you look at it. It exudes an inauspicious and desolate feeling. The young madam didn't even turn her head, wrapped her cloak tighter around herself, and walked straight toward the carriage parked by the roadside. No need, just leave it there. It'll save us the trouble of having to rebuild it again later. In the carriage on the way back, the young madam lowered her head, her pale fingers gently caressing the matching jade pendant tied at her waist, looking at it for a long, long time. This was the love token that young General Shen had given her back then. I still remember the day he gave out this jade pendant. He was as excited as a child who had received the greatest reward, pulling every servant in the manor to show off again and again. Yu agreed. She agreed. She truly likes me too. That scene feels as if it happened just yesterday. The 18-year-old young general, his eyes filled with brilliant starlight and intense love. The moment he received a mutual response from his beloved, he seemed like the happiest person in the entire world. But who could have imagined that such a beautiful scene, after merely 2 short years, would already feel like a lifetime ago, completely unrecognizable? The carriage swayed slightly, and I heard the young madam ask softly, "Hongju, you serve in the front courtyard. Do you know, when did Shen Zhao develop a change of heart?" I showed a troubled expression and hesitated for a moment, but looking at those clear yet dimmed eyes of hers, I still honestly said, "I heard the butler say in private that it was in the 2nd month after going to the border." The young general, while on patrol, rescued from a group of bandits Miss Lin, who was originally going to be exiled to hard labor. A hero saving a beauty love at first sight. It is a cliché plot often seen in storybooks. After hearing this, the young mistress didn't cry or make a scene, nor did she become hysterical. She simply removed, with extreme calmness, the matching jade pendant from her waist that she once treasured, and through the carriage window, tossed it out without any attachment. The jade pendant hit the hard bluestone pavement with an extremely faint shattering sound. But soon, it was completely drowned out by the heavy sound of the carriage wheels. He knew Lin Shitong long ago. What helpless orphan girl stranded at the border? It is all just a smokescreen. A deeply mocking cold smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. We've only been married for half a year, and he has already been completely captivated by that songstress from the Qingyin pavilion in the marketplace. I gasped in shock, my eyes widening suddenly. From the young mistress's mouth, I heard a completely different yet even more cruel and heartless version. At first, the young general simply couldn't refuse his colleagues' enthusiastic invitation, and reluctantly went with them to an ordinary music house to listen to a performance once. Lin Qitong was a musician at the Qingyin pavilion there, only playing the zither and singing on stage, priding herself on being pure and untainted by worldly dust. She looked pitiful and delicate, like a willow swaying in the wind, and had a beautiful voice, naturally attracting the covetous attention of many playboy sons in the capital. The hero saves beauty scenario was real. The young general happened upon the scene and rescued her from the hands of a government official's son who was bullying others with his power and attempting to force himself on her. Lin Qitong was overwhelmed with gratitude, kneeling on the ground and desperately begging him to redeem her and free her from her suffering. "Young master, your great kindness and virtue this humble servant has no way to repay you. This humble servant is willing to be your maid, even a mistress kept in the shadows, only asking to stay by your side to repay this debt of gratitude." The young general at that time was still clear-headed and firmly refused. "That is absolutely impossible. I already have a virtuous wife at home, and I've sworn never to take a second woman." But somehow, that pitiful and delicate figure quietly took root in his heart. The second time, when his colleagues invited him to the pleasure house again, he followed along almost without a second thought. However, he saw Lin Qitong heavily made up, moving among a group of young masters, her eyes flirting around, smiling ingratiatingly, drunk and hazy from wine. Seeing this, young General Shen immediately felt a nameless fire surge in his heart. He strode forward, grabbed the woman's wrist, and sternly demanded, "Where is that integrity you had before, remaining untainted despite the filth around you? Why are you willingly degrading yourself like this?" Lin Shitong forcefully shook off his hand, her eyes instantly reddening as she shouted aggrievedly, "Who are you to me? What right do you have to meddle in my business? I'm just a music house girl with no control over my own fate. Of course I have to plan more for my future. Since you're heartless enough to ignore me, fine. There are plenty of people in this world willing to dote on me." Though her words were tough, 2 lines of clear tears suddenly slid down, landing precisely on the young general's hand. The scalding temperature made his heart suddenly contract. In a moment of impulse, he gripped Lin Shitong's chin and, emboldened by the alcohol, kissed her heavily. "Isn't it just buying your freedom and taking you as mine? Whatever others can give you, Ishan Zhao can give you too." When the young mistress recounted this past, her tone was so calm it was heartbreaking, as if she were telling the story of a complete stranger who had nothing to do with her. I was speechless, taking quite a while to find my voice. "Young mistress, you never leave the house. Yet these secret matters, how do you know them so clearly?" She gently pressed her throbbing temple and pointed to her heart. "Here, there lies a system that others cannot see. It was the one that told me everything exactly as it happened. What strategy guide, what system, this explanation was just too fantastical and ethereal." I secretly worried in my heart that perhaps the young madam, due to the successive blows, had become so heartbroken that her mind was somewhat unclear. However, when our carriage returned to the Shen residence and we just stepped into the front courtyard, we suddenly saw two people standing in the spacious hall. It was none other than the resurrected young General Shen, and the mistress he'd been keeping close to him all along. Lin Qitong, a male infant, just over a month old and wrapped in brocade swaddling clothes, was being held joyfully in the arms of old Master Shen and Madame Shen, the two elders beaming with delight, unable to stop smiling. Wonderful. This is truly wonderful. Heaven be praised. The Shen family finally has an heir. Although Ava Corporation's origins are rather humble, considering her tremendous contribution in continuing the Shen family line. Let's bring her in as a concubine for now, Madame Shen declared decisively. Upon hearing this, young General Shen immediately became anxious and quickly stepped forward. Mother, this absolutely cannot be. Qitong came to me pure and innocent, and suffered terribly at the border. I swore to heaven that I would never wrong her or let her down. Madame Shen frowned, her expression darkening. Then what arrangement do you have in mind? He straightened his expression and said righteously, naturally, with the ceremony of an equal wife, I'll bring her into the family in grand style. Before he could finish his resounding words, he turned around and happened to meet the young madam standing outside the door, her face pale. Young General Shen's voice came to an abrupt halt, and he was clearly stunned for a moment, a trace of panic flashing in his eyes. After a moment, he forced out a smile. Are you? Eve returned safely. The imagined scene of a wife throwing herself into her husband's arms with excitement and crying tears of joy upon seeing him return from the dead didn't happen at all. The young madam just stood there quietly, nodded with an indifferent expression, her tone without any fluctuation. My see. The originally lively hall suddenly fell into a deathly silence. Everyone looking at the young madam somewhat awkwardly, unable to gauge what her attitude was at this moment. Lin Qitong, who was standing to the side, reacted extremely quickly. She walked forward gracefully, bowed to the young madam with a perfectly standard curtsy, and called out in a soft and gentle voice, "Elder sister." The young madam raised her delicate eyebrows slightly, looking at her with a half-smile. "Elder sister." Seeing this, young General Shen, as if afraid that Lin Qitong would be wronged, hurriedly stepped forward, tightly grasped Lin Qitong's hand, and shielded her behind his broad back. "You don't be like this. Qitong is already carrying my flesh and blood. Since she is about to enter the family according to the rules, she should naturally address you as elder sister. We are husband and wife who married as first spouses. We should be united as one. You've always been magnanimous, so you'll surely understand my difficulties and accept her presence, right?" The young madam's gaze fell coldly on their two hands tightly clasped together. Although young General Shen's face showed guilt, his hand didn't retreat in the slightest. Instead, he gripped the woman behind him even tighter. A child, she finally shifted her gaze, slowly lowering her eyes to caress her own flat stomach, murmuring softly, "Here, I once had a child full of hope, too. The news of your death was fake, but he, because of this heaven-deceiving lie, truly left me." Although the young madam later managed to cling to life through medicinal soups, after this ordeal her vitality was severely damaged, and her body always carried a frail, sickly air. Just like now, as she stood there, her complexion pale as paper, her figure thin and weak, compared to Lin Qitong hiding behind Shen Zhao with her rosy, healthy complexion, they were like heaven and earth. A flash of extremely unnatural guilt crossed young General Shen's face. He didn't want things to turn out this way either. But Qitong had just been found to be pregnant at that time. The doctor said her pregnancy was unstable, and she couldn't handle the slightest shock. I couldn't just abandon them, mother and child. But fortunately, although the one in your belly couldn't be saved, Qitong's child was at least born safe and sound. As he spoke of his newborn, the trace of guilt in his eyes instantly vanished, replaced by uncontrollable joy. Look, he turned and took the baby from Madame Shen's hands, presenting it like a treasure before the young madam. "This is the Shen family's eldest grandson. You're also the matriarch. So in the future, he'll respectfully call you mother too." The young madam didn't even glance at the swaddled infant, only stared blankly into the void. The doctor said I've been fundamentally damaged and am far too weak. I'll never be able to bear children again in this lifetime, since I'm destined never to be a mother in this life. What kind of mother would this child be calling? Young General Shen's pupils shook violently as he cried out in shock. Can't bear children. He became completely flustered, holding the child at a loss. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I really didn't know that faking my death would hurt you this badly. The heart-wrenching pain of losing her own flesh and blood, the despair of lifelong infertility in the end, it only earned a flimsy, weightless apology. The young madam stood still, her spine ramrod straight. No one could see through what kind of storm was hidden in those eyes that were like stagnant water. After a long while, she actually let out an extremely light laugh. It is fine. Hearing these 3 words, the young General Shen visibly let out a long sigh of relief, as if a 1,000-pound burden had been lifted. It is wonderful that you can be so understanding and think it through. Then about the marriage between Qitong and me, but Madame Shen sternly interrupted him from the side. I already said, with her background, she is only fit to be a concubine. What grand wedding ceremony could there be? The Shen family has already let you run wild at the border for a while. Know that you're back. You should settle down properly. But the young madam turned around and showed Madame Shen an extremely dignified smile without a single flaw. Mother, your daughter-in-law thinks we should follow my husband's wishes. If he wants to marry Ava Corporation as an equal wife, I, as the principal wife, have no objections whatsoever. Upon hearing this, Lin Chitong was overjoyed. She excitedly grabbed young General Shen's hand and shook it hard, but saw that Shen Zhao himself was instead standing there somewhat dazed. How come you agreed so readily? In the past you couldn't tolerate even a grain of sand in your eyes. The young madam acted as if she'd heard the biggest joke, slightly widening her eyes in feigned surprise. Now I have no family to support me, both parents are dead, and I've lost my child to rely on for the rest of my life. The only one I can depend on is you, my husband, isn't it? Given the circumstances, of course, I should be a dutiful, law-abiding, and absolutely non-jealous, virtuous wife and good mother. Isn't that what you think in your heart too, husband? Having his darkest inner thoughts exposed publicly in one sentence, a trace of awkward embarrassment flashed across young General Shen's face. In fact, he wasn't the only one who thought this way. Every master and servant throughout the entire household, who among them didn't calculate things this way in their hearts? During the worst of the fake death message incident, I personally overheard Madame Shen sneering sarcastically to the nanny in the corridor. That girl Jiang Yu is now someone with no one to rely on, with no maternal family to lean on. She can only shamelessly cling to our Shen family, this big tree. Just let Zhao make a fuss as he pleases. After all, she is just a tiger without claws. She can't stir up any waves. Even I, a mere servant, could clearly see that bone-deep mockery and icy coldness in the depths of the young madam's eyes, yet her husband, who once vowed to accompany her for life, was blind to it all, unable to see anything. Soon, that tiny bit of unease that had surged in young General Shen's heart was completely diluted by the immense joy of welcoming a new wife. The auspicious date for him to marry his equal wife was swiftly set, the 10th day of the 5th month. The 10th day of the 5th month. When I heard this date, my heart suddenly jumped violently, so much so that the young mistress had already turned around and returned to the east courtyard, while I was still standing alone outside the hall in a daze. Seeing this, young General Shen walked over with a frown and asked, "Hongzhu, why aren't you hurrying to follow and attend to your young mistress?" I fell to my knees with a thud, hesitated for a moment, but still gritted my teeth and said it. "Young General, on the tombstone of that cenotaph outside the city, the young mistress carved her year of death, and it says May 10th. This servant is truly worried that the young mistress might do something foolish." Young General Shen impatiently furrowed his brows and directly interrupted me. It must be that the false news of my death I sent back before gave Yu too great a shock. She did say such foolish things to me before about sharing the same bed in life and the same grave in death. He waved his hand dismissively. but now I've returned alive without a scratch. Since she has hope again, naturally she won't get stuck in a rut anymore. All right, go on now. I still have to busy myself with preparing all the matters for the wedding. Don't bother me with such groundless, trivial matters in the future. That very night, the young mistress somehow suddenly developed a high fever. Her forehead was frighteningly hot. Several batches of famous doctors from the city were called, and several doses of bitter medicinal soup were poured down. Yet there was no sign of improvement at all. She just kept sinking into a deep slumber. Madam's condition is likely due to her body never fully recovering from the injury, with worries festering in her heart. Combined with recent exhaustion, the illness came on fiercely like a mountain collapsing. The old physician stroked his beard, unable to pinpoint the exact cause, and could only prescribe some vague tonics. I was so anxious I ran around in circles, going to the front courtyard to fetch young General Shen several times, but he never once set foot in the east courtyard. I'm really busy right now, he sighed in his study, facing a pile of bright red wedding invitations. This wedding must be grand and magnificent. Qitong has suffered so much because of me. I absolutely cannot leave her with even the slightest regret. The young madam is ill. Just take the token and fetch the best physician to see her. What is the point of asking me to come? I don't know how to treat illness. The only time he showed up, he just perfunctorily stayed by the bedside for less than half a shikan. He hadn't even finished personally feeding her one bowl of medicine when a maid from the west courtyard came running with a message, saying the young master was suddenly crying and fussing terribly for some reason. Young General Shen immediately stood up and symbolically touched the young madam's sweat-dampened hair at her temples. He can't stay here with you all the time. If I catch your illness and pass it to the child who just turned 1 month old, that would be terrible. You must take your medicine on time and get better quickly. On the day of my grand wedding with Qitong, there are still many details in the inner quarters that need you, as the legitimate wife, to step forward and handle. His hurried departing figure had just disappeared beyond the threshold when the young madam, propping herself up on the edge of the bed, vomited out the medicine she had struggled to swallow, along with acidic fluids, until there was nothing left. In the extremely hazy gaps of consciousness, I heard her murmur with a breath as faint as gossamer, "Shen Zhao Yulia." Lied to her about a lifetime with one person, lied to her about pouring out all her affection, only to end up with nothing but empty joy. With this collapse, the young madam was out for another full day and night before she faintly regained consciousness again. She struggled to prop up her utterly weak body, and her first glance was toward that tightly closed door. I knew what she was hoping for, and my heart ached. I quickly comforted her gently. The young general must have been held up today by the complicated military affairs at Camponts. He is done. He'll definitely come to see you later. The moment my words fell, 2 rough servant girls responsible for sweeping outside happened to be carrying brooms as they walked beneath the half-open window lattice. Separated by a wall, the 2 lowered their voices, chatting excitedly. "Did you hear tonight? The young general is spending a fortune, booking the entire West Street to set off fireworks all over the city for Madame Tong, celebrating her birthday. How could you not have heard? They say the scene will be extraordinarily grand and lively. Let's hurry and finish our work, then go to West Street tonight to join the excitement and soak up some joy." The young mistress sat on the bed, listening in silence, just sitting there quietly for a full half-incense stick's time. Suddenly, she turned her head and called to me softly, "Hongju, help me dress up. We're going to take a look too." West Street was packed with people, crowded with common folk craning their necks in anticipation, all excitedly waiting for that legendary grand fireworks display. On the observation platform at the highest point of the city tower, a couple as perfect as jade figurines nestled together. It was none other than Shen Zhao and Lin Qitong in her splendid attire. Nearby, oblivious commoners laughed and sighed. I've long heard that young General Shen and his original wife were childhood sweethearts, with a bond so deep it makes others green with envy. Seeing this display of raising hell for his beauty today, the rumors are truly no exaggeration. Right after, the young General Shen on the high platform was heard clearing his throat with vigorous inner strength. his voice carrying across the entire long street fellow townspeople. Today is the birthday of the woman I Shen Zhao, love most in this life, Lin Qitong. I offer these fireworks filling the sky to wish her for the rest of her life. Peace every year, joy and fulfillment. Lin Qitong was so moved that tears welled up in her eyes, and she hugged his waist tightly. As long as a Zhao is by my side, I'll naturally be the most fulfilled woman in the world. The commoner who just spoke was stunned and asked the people nearby with some confusion. Lin Qitong, that is strange. I remember his legitimate wife's given name seems to be, it is Jiang Yu. She used to be the #1 talented lady whose painting skills stirred the capital. Who in the capital doesn't know her? A scholar nearby chimed in. Back when the Women's Academy was established in the capital, even the imperial family personally sent an invitation asking the young madam to become a teacher at the academy. But at that time, her heart and mind were completely filled with Shen Zhao, who was about to go off to war. To focus on preparing for her wedding, she resolutely declined that great honor. That legendary painting skill that once made waves in the capital gradually gathered dust after she devoted herself to cooking and became a married woman, turning into an old tale that few people mentioned anymore. The commoners were still whispering and chatting about something, but soon they were completely drowned out by the sudden burst of dazzling fireworks exploding in the night sky. Unable to hear anything clearly, young General Shen was indeed generous with his spending. Those fireworks that lit up half the capital burned continuously for a full hour without a moment's pause. The young mistress stood at the edge of the crowded throng, her head tilted slightly upward, her gaze calm as she watched the pair of lovers embracing tightly on the city tower. Colorful lights and shadows cast upon her pale, delicate face, flickering on and off, revealing an indescribable desolation. "Hongju, do you know what day it is today?" she suddenly asked. In reply to young mistress, today is the 7th day of the 5th month. The night wind lifted her thin garments, causing her frail body to sway precariously. Today is also my 20th birthday. My heart clenched sharply. I remembered clearly that before the young general went off to war, he had made her a deeply affectionate promise beneath the flowers and moon. "Ah, you trust me. I will definitely return victorious before your 20th birthday and give you a birthday gift that is one of a kind in this world." And now this once solemnly sworn one of a kind had already been casually given to another woman. My heart ached for her as if blocked by a huge stone. After returning to the east courtyard, I dove straight into the small kitchen and carefully prepared a steaming bowl of longevity noodles for her. When I pushed the door open carrying the bowl of noodles, I saw the young mistress sitting upright in the flickering candlelight, holding a wolf hairbrush, concentrating intently on painting on rice paper. With just a few strokes, the silhouette of a man had been sketched on the paper. That person had a tall and slender figure, standing gracefully, like Jade even. Though it was just a back view with no facial features visible, Owen could still genuinely feel that extremely handsome and aloof, dust-free temperament. The young general that young Madame drew is truly becoming more and more vivid and beautiful. I walked over, carrying the noodles, and praised sincerely. Her hand holding the brush paused slightly. Her fingertips gently brushed over the hem of the person in the painting, her eyes incomparably tender and affectionate. "Red Pearl, do you think the person in this painting really looks like Shen Zhao?" Speaking of whether it looked like him or not. Actually, anyone who wasn't blind would know it didn't look like him at all. Young General Shen was a military officer, carrying the wild youthful spirit of fine clothes and spirited horses, along with the solemn killing aura of the battlefield. This was completely different from the steady aloof temperament, like an exiled immortal in the portrait. But as a mere servant, how would I dare say it didn't look like him? I could only steel myself and nod repeatedly in agreement. It does. It looks just like him. Young Madame's painting skills are still as exquisite and masterful as always. My painting skills, she lowered her eyelids, a trace of deep reminiscence and longing showing in her gaze. It is because my master taught me well. The mentor who taught her to paint, according to the old folks in the manor, was the former imperial preceptor, Ixi Wu Yuan. He was a legendary figure of stunning talent and beauty, renowned throughout the land. whether it was his character, appearance, or heaven-defying abilities. Each aspect represented the pinnacle of the great Yin dynasty. Unfortunately, heaven envied his talent. 3 years ago, this imperial preceptor unfortunately died young. The young mistress pushed the scroll aside and, facing that portrait, slowly ate the bowl of longevity noodles bite by bite. She said, "Hongju, you are the first person to personally cook longevity noodles for me since my parents and master passed away one after another." In a couple of days, she put down the bamboo chopsticks and suddenly showed me a relieved smile. "I will personally instruct the steward to retrieve your indenture contract from the accounting office and return it to you. Your noodles taste excellent. After you're freed from servitude, go rent a small shop and open a noodle restaurant for a living. You'll surely be able to live a stable life." My heart first surged with wild joy, but after the delight passed, belatedly, the date carved on that tombstone suddenly flashed through my mind. The 10th day of the 5th month, only 2 days left, young mistress. My voice took on a sobbing tone. "Don't say such inauspicious things. You will surely live a long life of 100 years and live well, right?" She turned her head slightly to look at the cold moon outside the window, without answering. Unexpectedly, the next day, young General Shen actually came to the east courtyard for the first time ever. He was holding a thick stack of scrolls in his arms. Pushing open the door, he happened to see the young mistress still at the writing desk, carefully adding finishing touches to last night's painting for a moment. He was somewhat dazed. The irritation from recent days faded away, and a long, absent tenderness crept onto his brow. Are you painting for me again?" Perhaps the artist poured their heart and soul into it. That painting of the back figure was exceptionally vivid and beautiful. He seemed to recall the beautiful times from the past, and his voice became tender. "I remember before we got married, you always liked to hide in the pavilion and secretly paint me. Now we're already husband and wife, living under the same roof every day. And you're still painting, are you? You know, deep down, you've always loved me very much. You can't let me go," he said confidently, placing that heavy stack of booklets in front of the young madam. "So we believe, regarding my wedding with Chitong, you, as the legal wife, will surely put your heart into managing it. This is the wedding ceremony checklist. The rules are somewhat tedious and complicated, but I believe with your capabilities, you'll definitely handle everything properly. Chitong, after all, comes from a humble background and has no connections in the capital. Her feelings are inevitably sensitive and fragile. This wedding must be held extremely grand and respectable to show outsiders how much I value her, so she won't be looked down upon in the future. You, as the head wife, must be especially meticulous and thoughtful in these matters of ceremony and details." Young General Shen opened one of the pages, pointing at the densely packed items listed. "This is the trousseau list I personally prepared for Chitong help. Me look it over and see if there are any rare treasures in the storehouse that can be added to it." The young madam glanced indifferently at the exaggeratedly long list, her gaze pausing slightly at a certain spot. "You even took that finest piece of Hettian jade from the storage and had it made into matching pendants." "Yes." A trace of unnaturalness flashed in the young general's eyes as he explained. "Yesterday, Chitong saw the half of the matching pendant you gave me years ago, which I've always worn with me, and she was terribly envious, even secretly tearing up. I can't bear to see her wronged, so I could only order the best jade craftsman in the capital to work through the night to create an even more exquisite set for her." He grasped the young madam's cool hand in return, saying solemnly, You can rest assured. No matter who is added to the household, your place in my heart will not change, and my respect for you will absolutely not change. I promise you, aside from Chitong, you will never take any other woman into this household for the rest of my life." His vow rang out resoundingly, paired with that sincere expression, as if it truly came from the bottom of his heart. But I found it utterly ironic. Back when he welcomed the young madam through the gates, in an 8-bearer bridal sedan, in front of all the guests in the capital, he had sworn just as fervently to the heavens, even if every other man in this world takes 3 wives and 4 concubines, Ishan Zhao will absolutely never take a concubine you alone for this lifetime." The words still ring in my ears. Yet everything has already changed. The young mistress slowly raised her eyes and looked at him quietly. She was already extremely beautiful, her features possessing 3 parts more dignified grace of a noble lady than Lin Qitong, and 2 parts more scholarly elegance. At this moment, under the dim lamplight, that dignity and elegance, worn down by the torment of illness, transformed into a delicate fragility that would make any man unable to resist. She extended her slender fingers, gently pressing them against young General Shen's chest, feeling the heartbeat there, and said softly in an almost ethereal voice, "Actually, no matter who you take in, here, you will always have to keep an indelible trace of guilt for me. After all, it was you who solemnly promised me a lifetime with one person back then, and now it is also you who is the first to break that vow." Hearing these words, Shen Zhao's face indeed showed deep guilt and heartache. "Ah, you don't say that. For the rest of my life, I will definitely make it up to you double and treat you well. Tonight I won't leave. I'll stay in the east courtyard to keep you company." Since his feigned death and return from the border, he had spent every night in the west garden in warm and fragrant embraces, never having rested even a single night in the young mistress's room. The young mistress, however, withdrew her hand quite naturally, pulling away the distance between them. "The auspicious day for your marriage to Ava Corporation is right around the corner. Tomorrow is the actual day. You'd better not stay here tonight, lest you upset the new bride and cause more trouble." Young General Shen was rejected, and inevitably felt a bit disappointed in his heart. Yet he still felt gratified by her understanding of the bigger picture, sighing with a smile, "To be able to marry a virtuous wife as righteous and understanding as are you. What more could I, Shen Zhao, ask for?" When his figure completely disappeared into the deep night, I walked forward full of confusion and asked, "Young madam, the young general rarely shows signs of having a change of heart. Why did you shut him out and push him so far away?" She wearily rubbed her brow, the corner of her mouth curling into a cold sneer that saw through everything. "What do I want his person for? I only need to hold on to this last little bit of his guilty conscience. And that is enough. Promises made too lightly, when said too often, become as cheap as weeds." Shen Zhao's words, I won't believe even a single punctuation mark anymore. Later I went to sort out that dowry supplement list, and upon careful examination, it was densely packed with rare treasures and deeds to fertile land. Young General Shen had practically emptied out most of the Shen family's fortune and assets to give Lin Qitong face. Never mind the young madam's heart being dead as ashes and not believing him. Even I, a servant watching from the sidelines, don't believe a single word, the 9th day of the 5th month. Following the custom of noble families in the capital to pray for blessings and harmony before marriage, young General Shen brought Lin Qitong, who was about to marry into the family, along with the young madam who was the legitimate wife, and the whole group went in grand procession to Anfu Temple in the suburbs, where incense offerings were most abundant, to pray for blessings. In the back courtyard of the temple stood a century-old marriage tree so thick it would take several people to encircle it, with lush branches and leaves covered in bright red marriage plaques. Among the hundreds and thousands of wooden plaques, the one hanging in the highest and most prominent position was still the one the young general had personally flown up to hang, using his martial arts skills a year ago to win the young madam's favor. Red background with gold characters written in bold calligraphy, Shan Zhao and Zhang Yu, united in devotion till white-haired. Just as she walked into the courtyard, Lin Qitong looked up and saw that plaque, her face instantly turning deathly pale. She lowered her long lashes pitifully, tears immediately welling up in her eyes. She didn't say a word, but that delicate appearance on the verge of tears spoke louder than 1,000 words. The moment young General Shen saw her like this, his heart ached unbearably. Disregarding all the watching eyes, he directly reached out to embrace Lin Qitong's shoulders, then turned his head and said to the young madam in a somewhat hesitant tone mixed with consultation, "You look at this, how about? We still ask the temple's martial monks to take down that marriage plaque from before. Now that the situation in this household has changed, that plaque with only our 2 names on it, continuing to hang there, is really inappropriate." The young mistress didn't answer immediately, but instead looked up at the wooden plaque swaying in the wind on the treetop, many complex emotions flashing rapidly through her cold eyes. There was reluctance to let go of the past, lingering attachment to a heart given in vain, heart-wrenching pain. But after all these emotions surged through, they ultimately settled into a deathly calm stillness. She slowly nodded, her tone indifferent. As you wish. But when I followed her gaze, I was surprised to discover that where her eyes fell was not on that plaque about to be taken down. The one with her and Shen Zhao's names written on it. What she was focused on was the other side of the branch. Why is there a blank plaque on the ground here? When young General Shen ordered the guards to retrieve that old plaque, his movements were a bit rough, and he accidentally bumped the nearby branch, causing a blank wooden plaque with no names written on it to suddenly fall onto the bluestone pavement. Seeing this, the young mistress unexpectedly stepped forward quickly, bent down, and picked up that plaque in one swift motion, as if treating some rare treasure. She carefully and solemnly used a silk handkerchief to brush off the dust on it, holding it in her hands and examining it over and over for a long time. Afterward, as young General Shen hung up the newly written plaque, she also stood on her tiptoes and retied that blank plaque onto a slightly lower branch. The difference was that the one young General Shen had just tied up had a red background with black characters, bearing his and Lin Qitong's names. As for the young madam, she simply tied up that blank plaque with nothing written on it, securing it firmly. The two plaques hung side by side. When the mountain wind blew, the wooden plaques occasionally knocked against each other, making crisp thud-thud sounds. Young General Shen turned his head back and asked with a puzzled expression, "It is just a blank plaque with no wish written on it. What is the point of tying it up? If it fell to the ground, just let the sweeping monk clean it up." The young madam gently stroked the red cord on the plaque and answered indirectly, "Since this plaque was once hung up there, it must have been some couple's beautiful wish. Now that we've seen it, we can't just let it fall into the dust and ignore it." The three wordsome couple were like a small hammer, lightly tapping young General Shen's nerves, making him inexplicably dazed. He looked up at the new plaque he had just hung with his own hands, on which was clearly written Shan Zhao, Lin Qitong, devoted until death. The two characters Jiang Yu were no longer there. He suddenly recalled that prayer ceremony a year ago, when the young mistress had originally been reluctant to go, finding the mountain path too difficult. She had said to him tenderly at the time, "The affection between you and me is witnessed by heaven and earth. As long as we hold each other in our hearts, that is enough. Why must we run back and forth begging clay bodhisattvas?" But the young general had shamelessly pestered her, begging for several days before finally coaxing her up the mountain. "This is the most efficacious wish for lovers in the whole world. Ayu, we must hang our names at the highest point with our own hands, asking heaven to bless us to remain devoted until our hair turns white, never to be separated for all eternity." How laughable that now, the person who had vowed never to part from him had been replaced by another. He felt somewhat awkward for a moment, touched his nose, and explained with a guilty conscience, "Ayu, don't take it to heart. The abbot just said that only 2 people's names can be written on the marriage plaque, not 3. So that is why I sighed deeply in my heart. This man really wanted to have it all, and even his lies were so clumsy." The young mistress took one last deep look at that empty plaque swaying in the wind, paid no more attention to Shen Zhao's pale explanation, and only responded with a low. Standing to the side, I was suddenly startled because I discovered that the way she was gazing at that empty plaque was filled with an indescribable tenderness and deep affection, exactly like how she had looked at that white-robed man in her painting the other day. Just then, a mountain breeze gently blew past, and the wooden sign that was originally thought to be blank flipped over, revealing the characters carved on the back, because the font was written in extremely small regular script and carved in a corner. If you didn't look carefully, no one would notice it at all. But this maid of mine has always had sharp eyes, and recognized at a glance that what was carved on it was an extremely brief 5-character poem. "The fish in the pond yearns for its old abyss." After the prayer was completed, on the way back, the weather turned foul, and an extremely rare torrential downpour suddenly fell. The already rugged mountain path suffered a landslide due to the rain washing over it, and when passing through a treacherous bend, a huge falling rock mixed with mud and water came crashing straight toward our carriage. "Protect the master." The guards' terrified shouts were drowned out by the sound of rain. In the extremely violent jolting and rolling of the carriage, the cabin shattered into pieces, and Lin Chitong and the young madam were simultaneously thrown out of the carriage by the tremendous inertia. At the critical moment, young General Shen, relying on a warrior's instinct, swiftly grabbed hold of the shrieking Lin Chitong, firmly protecting her in his solid embrace, and the two rolled down the slope toward the relatively safer side. After steadying himself, he turned around in panic, trying to grab the young madam, who was about to fall into danger, but his hand only brushed desperately past her fingertips. "Are you?" He screamed in anguish, his eyes nearly splitting with rage, watching helplessly as the young madam fell heavily from the carriage wreckage, like a fragile fallen leaf, and that boulder, weighing at least 1,000 pounds, was rolling and crushing toward her with the force of thunder. Bang, a dull, heavy sound rang out, and the entire ground seemed to sink lower, mud and water splashing everywhere. Then came a deathly, bone-chilling silence, with only the sound of torrential rain washing over the leaves. Young General Shen's face was ashen, his entire body soaked through. His hand trembled violently in mid-air, and his legs felt like they were filled with lead. He didn't dare take a single step to check. In that critical moment between life and death, his body's instinct had chosen Lin Chitong, and now, facing his legitimate wife who might have suffered a catastrophic, bone-crushing disaster, he was too cowardly to confront it. Fortunately, heaven showed mercy the young madam had not suffered fatal injuries. That giant boulder, at the very last moment of its fall, happened to catch on a protruding hard rock nearby, miraculously changing direction at the final instant and narrowly missing the young madam's side as it crashed into the mud. But even so, the flying debris still cut her forehead, and blood instantly mixed with rainwater flowing down a shocking sight. Ayu, seeing she was still alive. Young General Shen rushed over with relief, apologetically and guiltily explaining, "I'm so glad you're okay. I was going to pull you back just now." Blood flowed down from her temple, almost covering half of the young madam's eye. Through that crimson veil of blood she looked extremely calmly into Shen Zhao's eyes, which were filled with panic after a long while. With my support, she struggled to stand up in the mud, her voice cold as ice. "Between life and death, there are no was going to's, Shen Zhao. The choice you made is the truest answer in your heart." Young General Shen, knowing he was in the wrong, was left speechless, unable to utter a single word. Instead, it was Lin Chitong, still shaken, who spoke up with concern after regaining her composure. "Zhao, tomorrow is the official day of our wedding, but sister has injured her forehead at this critical moment and disfigured her face. With this appearance, how can she appear and preside over the ceremony tomorrow? If my elder sister, as the mistress of the household, uses an excuse not to appear, all the guests in the capital who come to drink at the wedding feast will surely laugh at me behind my back." She lowered her head, looking extremely aggrieved. Young General Shen looked at the wound on the young madam's forehead, hesitated for a moment, and finally gritted his teeth in disgust with the young madam's lonely figure. "Ayu, how about today you don't have the doctor bandage this wound first? If it is wrapped in thick white cloth, it will really look inauspicious at tomorrow's wedding. When the time comes, just use a wider forehead band to cover it slightly, so outsiders won't notice anything amiss. Don't worry, once we get past tomorrow's most important ceremony, I will definitely use my name card to invite the best physician from the Imperial Medical Bureau to examine you. There absolutely won't be any scar left." The young madam's hand, which was tightly holding onto my arm, very noticeably paused slightly. After that, she said nothing and walked step by step toward the backup carriage with my support, never once turning her head back. This is what they call true feelings revealed in adversity. At a life or death moment, the body's subconscious can't lie. His first instinct was to save the mistress. That is bad enough. But what is truly nauseating is what he did next. His wife just narrowly escaped death, her forehead still bleeding. Not only did he feel perfectly justified listening to the mistress's instigation, he actually told his wife not to bandage it, just so it wouldn't affect the auspiciousness and face of his wedding with the mistress. Isn't this painting empty promises, delayed compensation? The girl's life and health, in his eyes, can't even compare to his vain show. Jiang Yu's not looking back at this moment is complete heartbreak. At night, worried that the wound on her forehead would hurt too much for her to sleep, I stayed by her bedside the entire time, not leaving for a moment. In my drowsy state, I vaguely heard the young mistress seemingly talking to herself in the air. System, after I exhaust all my life force tomorrow as payment to the system, if his regret reaches the required level, he will definitely be able to safely reshape his soul and come back to life, right? I don't know what that so-called existence in the air answered. I only saw her let out a long breath, and on her pale face actually appeared a relieved, breathtakingly beautiful smile. That is really wonderful. I've been waiting for tomorrow, waiting for this moment for far, far too long. My heart was pounding as I struggled to fully wake up and ask what was going on, but somehow my eyelids felt like they were weighed down by 1,000 pounds of stone. I couldn't open them no matter what, and soon fell back into unconsciousness. The next day, I was jolted awake by the deafening sound of firecrackers and piercing festive music outside the manor. The courtyard outside was extremely noisy. Soon young General Shen's voice came through, full of anger and impatience. "Where is Jiang Yu? The auspicious hour is about to arrive. All the guests are watching. Why hasn't she come out to the front hall to greet them as the legitimate wife?" His footsteps were hurried as he strode to the door in a few steps, and with a bang, he roughly shoved the door open. But he only saw me, just startled awake from the couch, looking completely confused. "Where is your young mistress?" He scanned the empty room and grabbed my shoulder, demanding harshly. This servant doesn't know. Last night the mistress was still in bed." I stammered in fright. He irritably shoved me aside and stormed around the room. I knew it. How could Jiang Yu have suddenly become so submissive and obedient lately? Turns out it was all an act. She has been biding her time until today, just to disappear at the most critical moment of the wedding, so that Qitong would be humiliated in front of all the guests and become a laughingstock. This woman's scheming is so vicious. He was furious to the extreme and slammed his hand hard on the rosewood desk beside him. With his movement, a piece of white jade used as a paperweight on the desk fell off, and a thin sheet of rice paper that had been pressed underneath was shaken loose and fluttered down, landing right at his feet, catching his attention. Young General Shen impatiently glanced down, and immediately after, his entire being seemed to have its soul suddenly drained away, instantly freezing in place. The color drained from his face at a visibly rapid pace until it was completely gone. I mustered up my courage and quietly leaned in for a look. On that paper were 3 glaring large characters written prominently, "Divorce Letter," and at the signature spot in the bottom corner of the paper, without any hesitation or smudging, the 2 characters Jiang Yu were written neatly and squarely. Young General Shen completely lost it. He couldn't even care that today was his wedding day anymore, and like a madman ordered all the servants and guards in the entire household that even if they had to dig 3 feet into the ground and turn the entire capital upside down, they must find the young madam for me immediately. He crumpled that divorce letter into a ball, clutching it tightly in his palm, and roared through gritted teeth. "You think you can divorce just because you want to? Dream on. Without my approval. You're a person of the Shen family in life and a ghost of the Shen family in death. Not possible in this lifetime." But the entire Shen manor was thrown into chaos like a pot of boiling porridge. They waited until the auspicious hour for the wedding ceremony in the front hall had completely passed, and as the guests discussed among themselves, they still hadn't found a trace of her. Just then, the old butler came to me with a complicated expression, pulling out a contract and a thick stack of banknotes from his sleeve and handing them to me. "Hongju, the young mistress, gave this old servant private instructions several days ago, saying that on the 10th day of the 5th month, these 2 things must be personally delivered to you. The young mistress said you're a good girl from today on. You're free from servitude." The butler's words struck me like a bolt from the blue. Me mind frantically flashed through all the young mistress's abnormal behavior these past few days. The 10th day of the 5th month. Today is the 10th day of the 5th month. Like a madwoman, I practically tumbled and crawled out of the courtyard, coming before young General Shen, whose eyes were bloodshot red as he paced the hall like a trapped beast. My voice trembling and shrill. That tombstone. The tombstone at the cenotaph outside the city. Young General, you must go there and look for the mistress. After hearing this, he was dazed for a moment, as if he hadn't processed it. The next instant, like a gust of wild wind, he directly knocked aside the servants surrounding him and ran out at full speed. He left in such haste, in such panic, that he even forgot to ride the horse tethered at the gate, just running toward the outskirts of the city on his own 2 legs. Lin Chitong, dressed in bright red wedding attire, was crying and chasing after him from behind, calling out his name, but he seemed completely deaf, turning a deaf ear to her calls. I couldn't rest easy and followed closely behind. I watched as he stumbled along the muddy mountain path, 1 foot deep and 1 foot shallow, falling several times due to exhaustion. The closer he got to that solitary tombstone halfway up the mountain, the heavier his steps became, as if his legs were bound with thousands of pounds of iron. It was a grey stone tombstone he had erected when he faked his death. I clearly remembered that when we came here last time, Shen Zhao's name was still clearly carved on it. But today, when we finally arrived at the grave, we discovered that the 2 characters Shen Zhao on the tombstone had been scratched beyond recognition by sharp stones, and the 2 characters' wife had also been forcefully and resolutely scratched out. On the wide tombstone surface, only 4 lonely characters remained. Tomb of Jiang Yu, just 4 simple characters, without any additional titles or embellishments. She was just Jiang Yu, no longer anyone's wife, and no longer an appendage of the Shen family. And right beneath that cold stone monument, a frail figure in a plain white dress, like a withered leaf that had exhausted all its vitality in autumn, quietly closed her eyes, leaning silently against the tombstone. Her expression was extremely serene, the corners of her mouth even carrying a trace of relief in a tiny arc. If it weren't for her face being deathly pale without a hint of colour, she would simply look like she was too tired and had fallen into a peaceful sleep here. It is the young madam, her hand hung limply at her side, the wide sleeves casually draped on the ground. When the mountain wind blew, lifting the corner of her sleeve, it revealed the small line of text hidden behind the sleeve. At the bottom right of the tombstone, died on the 10th day of the 5th month in the 11th year of Great Yin. A prophecy fulfilled it was today. Young General Shen's knees went weak, and with a heavy thud he collapsed to the ground, his kneecaps smashing against the hard stone slabs with a teeth-grinding thunk. His lips trembling, he let out a weak call like a trapped beast. "Are you?" The mountains were silent, without any echo. What answered him was only the sobbing wind passing through the pine forest. His body swayed, as if all his strength had been drained, and he almost crawled on his knees, dragging himself to the young madam. He shakily extended his hand, wanting to check her breath, but that hand which could steadily draw a hard bow on the battlefield now trembled like a leaf in the wind, completely disobedient. The moment his fingertip touched that patch of icy skin, he completely broke down, letting out a heart-wrenching wail. "Are you? Why did you leave me behind so resolutely?" He tightly held that petite body that had already lost its vitality in his arms, clutching it desperately tight, as if holding tight enough could bring her back to life. His mouth gaped open, but he couldn't cry a single tear. Only extremely heavy gasping sounds. "It is my fault. You. I was wrong. You truly know I was wrong. I shouldn't have deceived you for someone else. I shouldn't have had second thoughts at the border. I shouldn't have broken my initial promise to only marry you." Listening to his incoherent confession, I stood in the wind with tears streaming down my face. So he knew everything all along. He understood everything. Yet he still relied on the young madam's love, brazenly trampling on her blood and tears, shamelessly enjoying the blessing of having multiple women. Shen Zhao acted like he'd gone mad, refusing to bury the young madam no matter what. He just stayed there without eating or drinking, stubbornly holding Jiang Yu's body like a stone. at first still rambling on, talking to himself, repeatedly recounting the little details of their childhood sweethearts from the past. From the youthful crush they dared not speak of in school, to the ecstatic joy when they finally confirmed their feelings for each other later on. Actually, I was so scared at first. I thought the person you liked in your heart was that lofty and unreachable Mr. Wu Yuan. Every time you saw him from afar, your eyes would light up. I always thought that a rough military general like me would never have a chance. He finally got his wish and married home the white moonlight he had been longing for, but after obtaining her, he completely forgot his original intentions amidst those dazzling temptations outside. Overwhelming regret surged up along with those beautiful memories, turning into an insurmountable mountain that grew heavier and heavier. It forcibly bent the once upright and proud spine of this young general. By the third day, he couldn't even speak anymore. He just held Jiang Yu tightly with bloodshot eyes and a numb expression. If anyone dared to come close, he would bare his teeth like a wild wolf guarding its food. Madame Shen cried until she was half blind in one eye. Unable to persuade him at all, she could only stand in the courtyard in despair and curse. Shen Zhao, you unfilial son, are you unwilling to even leave Yu with her last bit of dignity? It is so hot these days. Do you want to leave her outside exposed to wind and sun, unable to find peace even in departure? This extremely cruel statement finally acted like a basin of ice water, thoroughly awakening this crazed man. In the desolate and bleak morning hall, a man's heart-wrenching sobs erupted, as if his very entrails were being torn apart. He cried until he nearly fainted several times, and due to the G-fire attacking his heart, his eyes went black, and he suddenly spat out a large mouthful of fresh blood, directly fainting beside the young mistress's coffin. Later, as the young mistress's most trusted personal maid, I was responsible for sorting through and packing up her belongings from when she was alive. The things she left behind were pitifully few, with hardly any valuable jewelry, most of them being paintings she had personally drawn over the years. I casually unrolled one of them, and on the paper were all the back views of a man dressed in white, either sitting under the moon playing the chin, or standing in the wind admiring bamboo, elegant and refined, transcendent and unworldly. In the corner of each painting, a signature was written extremely neatly. Chiyu, Chiyu! A sudden flash of inspiration struck my mind. I remembered this was the pen name the young mistress used when painting back when she was famous throughout the capital. Somehow me thoughts drifted back to beneath that marriage tree at Anfu Temple, recalling the phrase carved on the back of that wooden plaque. Chiyu thinks of the old abyss, the renowned and illustrious figure in the great Yin dynasty, whose name contained the character Yuan that I knew of, was none other than the former national preceptor who had passed away 3 years ago, Shi Wuyuan. So that is how it is, all of this. It was actually like this. After Jiang Yu's funeral was completed, I clutched that deed of sale and travel money, and left the Shen residence, that place of heartbreak, for good. Following her suggestion from when she was alive, I rented a shop in the city and opened a restaurant specializing in noodle dishes. Because the cooking was good and the portions generous, busyness has always been pretty decent. But whenever it is late at night and the shop closes, I often gaze at the sky full of stars, thinking of that gentle yet resolute mistress. As for Shen Zhao's situation afterward, I've also heard customers mention it from time to time. I heard that, after losing his wife, he completely fell apart, never recovering, drowning himself in alcohol day after day. Last time I happened to catch a glimpse of him from afar on the street. It had only been a few months, yet I saw that his temples had grown streaked with white, his back slightly hunched, where was even half a trace of that high-spirited, triumphant young general from before. As for that Lin Qitong, Galtho, she got her wish and married into the Shen residence from the wedding day onward. Shen Zhao never set foot in her courtyard again. Unable to endure this humiliation of being neglected, she ran to Shen Zhao's study every day, crying and making a scene. She turned the already lifeless inner residence into complete chaos, and Madame Shen was so upset she fell ill and couldn't get up. Later, Two more sensational scandals broke out in succession in the capital. The first matter was that Lin Chitong's background of having come from a music house back in the day was somehow thoroughly exposed by someone who traced it to the source with ironclad evidence. This really stirred up a hornet's nest. The scandal of Shen Zhao favoring a music house songstress to the point of doting on his concubine while destroying his wife, causing his original wedded wife's untimely death, spread like wildfire throughout the capital, even alarming the emperor in the Deep Palace. The emperor flew into a rage and publicly denounced him in court for his moral deficiency, lack of restraint, and disgrace to scholars. Immediately after came an imperial edict demoting him 3 ranks. Now, he had been relegated to the most bitter and desolate city gate guard post, becoming a lowly idle captain, enduring countless sneers and cold shoulders from his colleagues both openly and covertly every day. And the second matter was even more bizarre. The rumoured national preceptor Shi Wuyuan, who had supposedly passed away 3 years ago, was actually spotted in the Jiangnan region, said to have recast his golden body and come back from the dead. Days flew by quickly amid the mundane atmosphere of daily life, and in the blink of an eye, it was the year-end with heavy snow falling everywhere. 2 days before New Year's Eve, the capital experienced a blizzard rarely seen in decades. Looking at the nearly deserted pedestrians on the street and the desolate business, I rubbed my frozen hands, preparing to close up shop early. Just then, the heavy cotton curtain hanging at the entrance was lifted from outside, and in walked a tall, slender man draped in a dark cloak with snow-white robes underneath. The small noodle shop, which had seemed somewhat dim due to the wind and snow, suddenly became bright and radiant the moment this man stepped inside. I stood dumbly behind the counter, staring at the visitor. People often say that the banished immortals described in poetry must look like this, right? Without anyone needing to introduce him, a name of stunning talent naturally sprang to my mind. Shi Wuyuan in this world, only he could match such appearance and character. Shi Wuyuan brushed the snow off his shoulders and gave me a polite smile as warm as spring breeze. Boss Su, the wind and snow outside are too harsh. My little disciple has been going on and on, saying that the noodles you cook yourself are a rare delicacy in this world. I wonder if I could trouble you to light the fire and make 2 bowls of hot noodles for her. Of course. Please, both of you. Have a seat, I stammered excitedly. He turned around, lifted the curtain, and called out extremely gently into the vast wind and snow outside. Ayu, it is cold out there, coming quickly. The long missed way she called me. Ayu made the blood in my entire body boil instantly. I straightened up abruptly and stared fixedly at the doorway. Soon, a slender figure wrapped in a fiery red fox fur walked in with a chill about her. The young girl had snow-white skin and a jade-like face, with lively and cunning eyes, extremely beautiful and endearing, although the appearance of this body wasn't the person I was familiar with, but I knew by instinct it was her. 2 bowls of steaming hot noodles were brought to the table. The young girl slurped her noodles while chattering away with Shi Wuyuan beside her, her expressions rich and lively. I stood not far away, watching in a daze. The Jiang Yu, in my memory, had received strict upbringing since childhood and had always maintained the proper demeanor of a refined lady from a prestigious family. Even during meals, she observed the rule of not speaking while eating or sleeping, never saying half a word more than necessary. The her before my eyes, though her appearance had changed, was living in a different, more vibrant way. Shi Wuyuan didn't find her noisy at all. He simply propped his chin with one hand, listening with a smile. From time to time, he took out a handkerchief and gently wiped the soup from the corner of her mouth. His tone extremely doting. Eat slowly, be careful not to burn your tongue. If you like it, we can come here often from now on. That intimate demeanor and completely unguarded behavior, anyone with eyes could tell this was far beyond the boundaries that should exist between ordinary master and disciple. In the eyes they cast toward each other, it was as if the whole world reflected only the other's figure, with no room left for anyone else. After eating and drinking their fill, just before leaving, the young woman turned around and flashed me an extremely familiar and friendly, brilliant smile. Bosu Tode's noodles were delicious as always. Thanks for treating us. The road ahead is long, so take care of yourself too. She turned to step into the wind and snow, her movement a bit too large, accidentally bumping into what Shi Wuyuan was holding. An exquisitely mounted scroll painting fell to the ground, rolling open and spreading out right at my feet. In the painting, there was still the back view of a man dressed in white, sitting alone beneath a clear and cold bright moon. The brushwork was delicate, the artistic conception profound. Every strand of hair on the figure seemed to carry the painter's deep and inseparable emotions. A person's appearance and personality might undergo earth-shattering changes after being remade, but only this brushwork ingrained in the bones, and the habit of sketching lines could never deceive anyone. I stared dumbfounded at the painting on the ground, my eyes instantly moistening, lips trembling, finally unable to hold back a soft cry. "Young madam, is it really you?" The girl bent down to pick up the painting, her fingertips gently patting away the fine dust clinging to it. Her expression somewhat helpless, yet revealing a kind of tranquility that comes after weathering countless storms. She sighed softly. "Hongju, that name, full of tears and grievances, has long been an old matter thoroughly buried in my past life. This broken body was already left behind on that cold 10th day of the 5th month. From now on, there is no need to mention it again. Now I have a new name." She turned her head, her eyes flowing with emotion as she glanced at the noble man beside her, who seemed like a deity, her smile blooming like flowers, brilliant as stars. "Now I'm called Shiyu." Because of this long-awaited reunion and recognition, they sat down by the stove once more. On this cold winter night, with heavy snow sealing the city, accompanied by a pot of steaming fragrant tea, they recounted to me in detail a bizarre past event unknown to others, alone capable of turning heaven and earth upside down. It turned out that the person Jiang Yu truly loved deep in her heart, from the innocent awakening of first love to the end point of utter despair, from beginning to end, was only Xie Wuyuan. Shen Zhao was merely a bitter accident in her life that she had no choice but to go through with. Back then, my master actually exhausted all his strength and fell trying to save me. Ziyu held the hot tea in both hands, the curling steam blurring her eyes as her voice dropped lower. That concubine in my family, who was deeply favored by my father, was jealous of the deep affection between my father and mother, so she bribed the servants and put a vicious rare poison in the food sent to our courtyard. That day, I was originally destined to perish together with my parents, but my master, that old man, was proficient in the arts of xuanhuang. At the last moment, he rushed over, disregarding the backlash, and forcibly performed a secret technique, transferring all the toxins that had already taken effect in my body into his own flesh. For her sake, Shi Wuyuan gave up his honored position as imperial preceptor, gave up his heaven-reaching lifespan, and in the end couldn't even leave behind a complete corpse. During those dark and sunless days, Jiang Yu simply couldn't find a reason to continue living in this world. Just when she was in extreme pain and ready to give up her will to survive, she encountered in the darkness that mystical existence called the system. That was a luminous entity possessing extremely mysterious energy. It issued me a task that had to be completed, as long as I could successfully capture the heart of the young and accomplished Shen Zhao, making such a cold and hard person completely fall for me. It would be able to invoke the forbidden law of reversing time and space, in exchange for my master Shi Wuyuan's reconstruction and return. Jiang Yu didn't hesitate for even a moment and agreed on the spot, because she knew better than anyone that Shen Zhao had harbored affection for her since childhood. As long as she was willing to put away her pride and cater to him, this capture task wouldn't be too difficult for her, as long as Shi Wuyuan could open his eyes again to see this world, who she spent her life with and how much grievance she endured had already become insignificant. But things are unpredictable. Although Shen Zhao married her, he was easily moved by another woman's tears at the border. His change of heart and betrayal directly caused the system's assessed progress bar to completely collapse. The system remained silent in her mind for a long while, finally offering another remedy that could be called tragic. Since the gentle approach has failed, there is actually another way to collect energy, that is to use your own life force as a sacrifice to collect Shen Zhao's regret value until it reaches maximum level. But the ultimate result of activating this plan is that you need to completely bid farewell to the past, sacrifice all your past and life, and experience a true ending in this world. Hearing this, I finally understood everything. No wonder the young madam back then was willing to compromise and endure humiliation, just to force Shen Zhao to keep that tiny bit of guilt toward her. No wonder she had that particular date carved on the tombstone. It turned out all this endurance and suffering was for this final moment to use that maxed-out regret to light the soul lamp for Shi Wuyuan's return. But for me, Shi Yu raised her head, her gaze like water, as she stared lovingly at the profile of the man beside her, the affection in her eyes almost overflowing. Being able to use my scarred body to exchange for his clean and refreshing return, that is not a price at all. These two people could both walk toward the abyss without hesitation for each other's sake. That unwavering determination, that resolve to trade life for life, was something someone like Shen Zhao could never understand. This was worlds apart from Shen Zhao's kind of pseudo-devotion, always making excuses for himself, wavering between two women. Then later, I couldn't help but ask curiously, my voice trembling slightly with excitement, "How did you get a new life?" Shiryu blinked playfully and said with a soft laugh, "This is probably heaven's compensation for all our suffering. Because the system said it was moved by my obsession and gave me a reward after completing the mission, it let me restart my life in the body of a drowned girl in another timeline. Their mutual devotion was never a choice made after weighing pros and cons, but an obsession carved into their very bones. You died for me. So I'll live for you, no matter the cost, just to reunite with each other." In contrast, Shen Zhao's so-called deep affection was nothing but an excuse for fickleness, a half-hearted evasion, appearing incredibly cheap and laughable in the face of this life and death bond. Most fortunately, heaven ultimately softened, and even the system couldn't bear to tear apart this ill-fated couple, giving them a chance to start over. It turns out all the suffering was just to make their reunion more precious. All the obsession was simply because the other was their only salvation. The moment her words fell, the door curtain of my little noodle shop, which had been rattling loudly in the cold wind, was suddenly yanked open with extreme force. Along with the icy snowflakes swirling in, a hunched figure with a haggard face stumbled in like a wandering ghost. It was Shen Zhao. The old cotton robe on his body was already tattered and worn, his disheveled hair and beard covered with a thick layer of white snow. He was frozen pale with blue lips, and in that dim corner, who knows how long he'd been eavesdropping there like a stone statue. His originally hollow eye sockets were now so red, they seemed about to drip blood, staring fixedly at Shiyu, his throat making broken gasping sounds. "Are you what you just said? Is it all true? From beginning to end? You really never loved me? Not even for a single day?" Shen Zhao completely broke down. Like someone grasping at a last straw, he staggered toward the table. "So, all these years of what I thought was loving care for you, in your eyes, was nothing more than a tool to complete your mission. You even schemed against me to save him, making me live my entire life with the guilt of killing you with my own hands. If I hadn't been sick with longing day and night, coming to this Hongju shop to find some trace of you that remained, just how long would I have continued to be deceived by you, woman?" Hearing this extremely selfish questioning that even carried a hint of accusation, Shi Wuyuan, who had always been gentle as jade and unruffled, instantly turned cold and sharp as frost in his eyes. He shifted slightly to the side, firmly shielding Shiryu behind him, the pressure emanating from his body making the air in the entire small noodle shop seem to freeze. "Deceived?" Zi Wuyuan let out a cold laugh, his tone like an ice blade from the far north. "Shen Zhao, why don't you feel that conscience of yours filled with lust for power and selfishness, and ask yourself, when has my disciple ever truly deceived you? The one who swore to protect her for life was you, and the one who later faked his death for some entertainer and abandoned her without a care, wasn't that you too? Did Ayu hold a knife to your throat and force you to have a change of heart? Did Ayu press down your head and force you to marry someone else on her birthday? You destroyed that strategy with your own hands. You chose betrayal yourself." Shi Wuyuan's every word pierced the heart. With each sentence Shen Zhao heard, his face grew paler, until he could barely stand and nearly collapsed to the ground. Shiyu extended her slender hand, gently yet firmly taking Shi Wuyuan's hand. She slowly stepped out from behind him, facing Shen Zhao, who now looked like a beggar with a calm expression. Her gaze was incredibly peaceful, without towering hatred, only a sense of relief from having completely let go. "Shen Zhao, you're wrong. During those days as your wife, I never neglected you in daily matters. I once thought, missions are missions, life is life. If you could truly treat me as you promised in the beginning, I might not have been unable to spend the rest of this life with you peacefully in the Shen residence. But what about you? You personally snuffed out that last bit of compassion I had left for you. I was wrong. Can you give me one more chance? Shan Zhao dropped to his knees with a thud, his hands desperately trying to grab the hem of her clothes, crying with snot and tears streaming down his face. I don't believe you never loved me. You used to paint so many pictures of my back. I couldn't stand listening anymore. I walked out from behind the counter and thrust the scroll that had just fallen right in front of his eyes. Captain Shen, stop deceiving yourself. Take a good look, the bearing of the person in this painting, the aura emanating from him. Which part resembles you? A crude military officer who only knows how to hurt his wife with lies. The young mistress has been painting diligently all these years. She has always been painting young Master Xian. Not a single stroke was ever left for you. Shen Zhao was thunderstruck. He stared wide-eyed at the painting, as if all his spirit had been drained from him, instantly collapsing. It turned out that what he had been so proud of, his so-called wife's deep affection, had been nothing but a beautiful dream he had conjured up himself from beginning to end. Xie Yu looked at him and delivered her final judgment. Shen Zhao, the debt of gratitude I owed you, that life of mine from my previous existence, has been completely repaid. From now on, through the yellow springs and the azure heavens, we owe each other nothing and will never meet again. With that, she turned and exchanged a smile with Shi Wuyuan. The two held hands, nodded slightly at me, then turned together and resolutely stepped into the swirling snow. Shen Zhao, like a madman, still tried to chase after them, but was directly knocked over into the snow by a casual wave of powerful wind from Shi Wuyuan. He could only watch helplessly as that red fox fur and white figure walked further and further away, finally disappearing completely into the vast white world. Clutching tightly in his hand the corner of the severed robe, he let out a desperate wail like a cornered beast on that empty long street. He had finally obtained the equal wife he wanted, obtained the eldest son he wanted. But he had forever lost the most precious, genuine heart in this world, condemned to spend his humble and lengthy remaining years in endless regret and coldness. The snow outside the door fell even heavier, like tearing cotton wadding. Xie Yu was like a happy snow rabbit, hopping and skipping through the thick snow, from time to time mischievously grabbing a snowball from the tree branches and sneakily pelting it at Shi Wuyuan's back beside her. Her laughter was as crisp as silver bells in the wind. And in this desolate winter night, just hearing it made one's heart feel warm, a moment of peaceful contentment. Only when walking beside a lover who truly knew how to cherish her, could her originally lively nature, suppressed by the deep courtyards and large mansions, finally be completely released. Or rather, this was the original appearance of that brilliantly talented and unrestrained Jiang Yu from back then. Shi Wuyuan. She suddenly stopped in her tracks, cupped her hands around her mouth like a megaphone, and shouted loudly toward the snow-filled sky. In this life, the next life, and the life after that, we have to stay together forever and ever. Okay. The young handsome man stopped in his tracks, his eyes so tender they could drip water. He reached out naturally and brushed away the snowflakes that had settled on the top of her head, letting out a soft, low chuckle, his voice deep and mellow. To receive such a promise from my wife is my greatest honor. After finishing the entire novel, me emotions couldn't settle down for the longest time. This is literally a textbook example of a drama about true heart for true heart. Heartless ones swallow bitter fruit. The tragedy of Shen Zhao's character is completely self-inflicted. He is just like those wanting-it-all people we often see in life. He craved Jiang Yu's dignified gentleness, yet also wanted Lin Shitong's pitiful vulnerability. He thought he could use the extremely childish and cruel method of faking his death to achieve the blessing of having multiple wives, not realizing that love is exclusive and can't withstand any tests or deception. In contrast, our female lead, Jiang Yu Shi, is truly a clear-headed and strong female protagonist. She gave Shen Zhao a chance, and when Shen Zhao blocked that knife for her, she really thought about living a good life together. But when she discovered his infidelity and betrayal, she didn't act like traditional melodramatic female leads who compete with other women or try to win him back. Instead, she immediately cut her losses and focused on her core goal, reviving Shi Wuyuan, who truly loved her and was worthy of her love. If in a relationship, Someone makes you suffer grievances. Someone keeps trying to test your boundaries. Please be sure to be like Jung Yu and decisively withdraw. Don't cling to that cheap love that comes with conditions. We should believe that in this world, there will always be someone who will treat you as their pond fish, who will unwaveringly choose you. Before meeting that right person, please be sure to love yourself well and be the protagonist of your own life. Alright, today's gossip session ends here. I wish every darling can have a lover as steadfast and devoted as Xu Wuyuan, and possess a soul as bold and fearless as Jiang Yu. See you next time.